Okay. Hey, David, how are you?
Very well, thank you, William.
Thanks for joining. Listen, it's great to be here today. My name is William Beer. As Maria mentioned, I'm general manager of a new startup called Mitiga, which focuses on cloud security and incident response. And I'm thrilled to be joined by David Deane, who's a partner at Ernst & Young. David and I had the opportunity to work together a good couple of years ago, and I'm thrilled that we're back online sharing ideas and maybe some little controversial thoughts around the union between cyber and digital. But maybe before we go any further, David, do you want to talk a little bit about yourself and explain what your role is at EY?
Yes, thank you, William. I'm the leader of the digital practice here at EY, and primarily what we do is large-scale digital transformations for both financial services and non-financial services industries. And at the moment, have a lot of different projects with some very interesting clients where cyber and digital experience is wholly coming together.
Oh, well, that's good to hear. But maybe before you dig into this, David, tell us a little bit more about how you got into this role, and what does your normal day look like? I'm sure there isn't a normal day, but tell us a little bit about what really excites you when it comes to digital and the work that you do.
I think what's most exciting about it is the ability to reimagine the processes and the experience that you deliver from what it was, existing into the new world. And then associated to that is the fact that 10, 100, a million people can be then touching and feeling that experience that you've created in real time, both in terms of a physical experience, but also online as well. So it's not only just the ability to sort of recreate, but also having people give you immediate feedback on that is fantastic.
No, that's interesting. And yes, if I think about my world, what I enjoy is the pace of change. Cybersecurity is a bit like an arms race. It's changing all the time. And if there's one thing that frustrates me a little bit, and I've been in this industry for quite a while, as you know, is that there isn't as much innovation as you would expect. Yeah. And I think that leads into some of the things we're going to touch on today, because I see so much innovation in your space, so
Yep.
many, new technologies and different thinking and new methodologies. And cybersecurity, quite frankly, I'm not saying across the board, but generally speaking, is much more traditional in the way they approach, or the way we approach problems. What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts?
I simply, firstly, definitely agree with you that my area, change is a constant, I think is the fair comment there. I think also in terms of what we're seeing is COVID, obviously very topical at the moment. That has had a huge impact on the type of work and projects that companies want to do. And what we're seeing is that obviously more work is moving online, virtual aspects like this conference. People are looking to simplify the processes. People are doing more complex business processes online, but not forgetting the physical aspects, because obviously there's that human connection side. So when you start seeing all of those things come together, what's at the sort of core of all of this is that ability to maintain security, resiliency, privacy, and so forth. All of those things have got to come together into that solution. So we are seeing those elements of the solution, come to the forefront. And it's about how do you maintain a beautiful experience and make sure that you're resilient, secure, and have the right data privacy controls.
Yes, and if I can just pick up on a couple of things that you said, which I thought were interesting. You talk about the beautiful experience. And I know from my past experience working with you, that's top of mind. And it's interesting because generally speaking, when it comes to security, no one talks about the user experience, let alone a beautiful experience. I mean, if you think about VPN technologies and when you need to log into your virtual private network, what a clunky piece of software, generally speaking, that is. And when you think about the time we lose every day when we log into our VPNs, and you multiply that by the amount of employees you have, incredible amount of lost productivity. So I think the cyber industry has a lot to learn from folks like you, because we don't, generally speaking, think about user experience, let alone beautiful experience.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about that, when I'm talking about beautiful experience, I think particularly in the job that we do every day, at work, it's all about friction and what is the most frictionless experience. And I would say that, I've been fortunate where I have had some very frictionless experiences with security and privacy, where that sort of extra moment has been taken to not only make sure that my data and me as an identity are not exposed and so forth, but also that I have this sort of frictionless experience. And it's such a big difference and can be a really competitive advantage in that respect. So I think, more and more we're seeing that come through in terms of the design work and so forth. But as you say, there's probably more ground to make up there.
That's interesting. It makes me reflect, because with my security hat on, oftentimes we say that friction is good, because friction can actually demonstrate to the client or the end user that there is security in place. So for example, if I was to log on to my bank account and I saw no security measures at all, it was just a streamlined process, some clients might think, well, where's the security? Where's the protection? So it's a delicate line, don't you think?
Yeah, and that's where you've got to use visual cues on screen within the experience to make sure people realize that you are actually fully protected. So I think this is where the experience and cyber come together, whereby it's not just about the frictionless experience, but then it's providing, content around the screen and off and online to make sure people fully understand that they are protected whilst they've had this very seamless experience. And I think that's the perfect type of balance that you need to get to.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There was a recent survey from our friends at Cisco that I thought was quite interesting. It said that 69% of executives polled are reluctant to innovate in areas such as digital products and services because of perceived cybersecurity risks. That's a really high number. What are your thoughts on that? 69% seems pretty steep.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a very, very high number. I would say that, it really depends upon the industry as well. So I think there are certain industries where, regulation are stronger and have to be for the right reasons, versus others that are not. So I think subject to the industry, that is, a stat that would change, I think. In terms of what we're seeing, I think that, that is starting to change, albeit very slowly, as customers, and this will obviously be impacted a lot by the fact that we're starting to do more and more online. So as that demand increases, I think what you'll see is that the customer will push for more of that innovation from not only the experience but the cyber side, and bringing those two worlds together. So I think that the way things are moving, that's going to be something that's going to come together quite naturally as customers push for that.
Got it. If I think about my client conversations over the last couple of months and some of the impacts of COVID-19, there's a couple of things that spring to mind. I mean, one, we've also seen a big uptick in cloud security work. So a lot of clients have been asking us to come in and do cloud security posture assessments. And what's interesting there is the lack of talent. There's a lot of people looking for talented cloud experts or cloud security experts. So I see you smiling. What are your thoughts on the talent shortage and how that's potentially impacting some of these initiatives?
Yeah, so I think in most areas and most clients I deal with, there is a dearth of that sort of, be it new technology, data science, AI type stuff, be it cybersecurity, and some of the sort of data protection side, and then through to the technical architects and the ability to work in distributed agile scrum teams. I think across all of those areas, you're seeing shortages, because more and more things are moving online. More and more things we do are about that online experience mixed with the physical experience. So increasingly, we're seeing that sort of skill shortage. But that's where really, as an organization, we're looking to train up and retrain people, bring people through from the graduate side. So we are looking to provide more of those people. But definitely in the moment, there is a skill shortage, I would say.
Yes, and the other thing that comes to mind and is pretty evident from the press is the big uptick in ransomware.
Yeah.
Just today, it was reported a large automobile manufacturer had been hit by ransomware, taking out their operations. We're actively involved in a lot of these types of projects, helping clients not just mitigate the problem, but try and identify the source and why that happens. So root cause analysis. Do these types of conversations come up with your clients? I mean, when you're kicking off digital enterprise transformation initiatives, do you find that the people you're speaking to on the digital side of the house are asking cybersecurity questions, or do they delegate that across to the CISO?
No, so I would say if I look across the spectrum of my career, there was a situation where I think cyber and sort of the digital transformation pieces were slightly separate. What's increasingly happening is that you cannot not be secure, you cannot not be resilient. So those conversations are now becoming part and parcel of the actual user stories, the requirements, the overlying proposition side to those digital transformations. And what we're increasingly seeing is this sort of multi-dimensional team where you take cyber, where you take risk experts, where you take compliance experts, and they're folded into the overall development of the product. And increasingly, many of the business sponsors are looking for real-time mechanisms to be able to ensure that they are secure, resilient, and so forth, to be built into the experience. So that is a growing trend. And that's obviously been helped by techniques like product management and agile scrum techniques and so forth.
That's good news, because my experience tells me, at least in the past, there were some tensions and a little bit of separation. I mean, just if I think again about my world, the cybersecurity world, generally speaking, tends to be fairly isolated from the privacy or the privacy world, which never made sense to me, because we're still trying to address similar problems, oftentimes using similar technologies. And there's incredible amount of economies of scale and benefits that can be had by having a joined up vision. Same is true for physical security. Certain leading edge organizations that I've dealt with have also looked at how can they bring physical security into the same discussion, because obviously physical security now is using digital techniques and digital technologies to help improve their own physical security. So I think the more convergence we have between physical, cyber, privacy, obviously the digital piece, and then maybe some of the regulatory and compliance components, that's going to make it better. And I like how you put it around folding them in, because I think that'll make a difference.
Yeah, and to that point, William, I think one of the things that I'd add to this discussion is if you take industries like financial services and health, they are converging around the notion of wellness. And in doing so, what's happening is that the cyber risk and privacy risks and so forth are being increased, because you have, obviously on the health side, my Apple Band, or the IoT aspect of that is then getting integrated into the financial aspects of the proposition. So what you're seeing is these two industries come together, which is then forcing different disciplines to have to work together closely to ensure that the overall experience is protected. And I definitely see an increasing focus on that as we move to a world where, certainly with financial services, it moves not just in the branch and online, but also to your absolute everyday life and everything you do, and the fact that everything can be monitored through sensors. I think that's going to have a tremendous impact on this convergence where cyber, privacy, and so forth all come together with the experience.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I do think, though, that the cyber industry probably will need to step up its game. I think some of the traditional methodologies and clearly some of the tools and techniques are a little dated and don't necessarily keep the pace. I mean, in my experience from working with people like you and some of the folks in your teams, they were pushing us to go faster. How can we not necessarily say no, but how can we give you guardrails, right? So you can go faster, but go faster safely. And I keep that in mind, frequently when I speak to clients, because too often I think cybersecurity professionals are just seen as, you can't do that. That's not possible. And I think the answer should be, let's explore options. Let's try and understand what your requirements are, your timescales are, and then put in place the right measures to allow you to actually go faster. And I truly believe that, but I don't think the cyber industry is there yet.
Yeah, and so obviously, William, one of the things that we've been doing a lot at EY is this notion of product management, and certainly our view of that is that it's this all-encompassing piece, and that you're focusing on getting out functionality as quickly as possible to be able to iterate and understand, and in doing so, you cannot put the brand at risk. So in that way, I think some of those methods are starting to move across into the cyber world. I'm seeing increasingly with ourselves, risk and compliance people working within that sort of broader product management framework that we have. And I think those things will really help bring the two worlds together.
I agree with that. I think we also need to reflect on culture. And I know that's a fluffy word, but I do think that the culture, the overarching culture in cybersecurity tends to be around control, right? Yeah. And locking things down. And we're very risk adverse, and we tend to take that risk adverse nature into our personal lives as well. That's maybe one of the reasons I'm sitting up here in Canada in a cottage right now, as opposed to being down in New York City. But I think, again, there needs to be a recognition of the different cultures. And again, I remember working with some of your team members, and it's not just about age, but it's around background, right? Much more relaxed, much more outspoken, as opposed to some of the cybersecurity folks who, again, are very formal and structured. And I think we need to recognize those cultural differences to be able to, as you say, fold in the different teams more effectively. Yeah. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no. So I think the cultural side is a fascinating discussion, because I think it extends further than just digital and cyber. I think what you are seeing are really this ability for organizations to be able to work together, to have very high collaboration, to have that sort of metrics framework that allows each of those different teams to be able to do their job, but also get the recognition for what they're doing. Those types of developments are really critical for us as we move forward, both as an industry and obviously individual companies. And so I don't think it's just cyber and digital, albeit they are somewhat, there's a gap between them at the moment. I think it's more broadly than that. And I think organizations that really do focus on that level of culture and getting the right culture and the innovative culture are really seeing some significant improvements and upticks. And so I would say it is a differentiator. I think it's a very tough thing to do, but those that focus on it and have frameworks and methods to do it, I think are seeing some major advantages.
Yeah, that makes sense. I remember, and I don't think you were in this meeting, but I remember we were at a meeting at a downtown New York City financial institute, and the meeting was quite formal, and I was suited up, as were most of the other people from the firm. And then a bunch of your folks came in and promptly sat down on the floor. I remember thinking, should I go and sit on the floor with them? But it was just a different energy and a different approach. And again, I as I get older, I then tend to think I need to reflect on that and make sure that I'm staying in pace with this exciting change and these young folks who are bringing so many new things to the picture.
I think, William, just sort of reflecting on what you said there, what I am seeing, which I think is very interesting, is you talked about COVID and we talked about the change in the industry. I am seeing a desire by clients to really rethink what they're doing in the context of the work itself. And in doing so, that is really pushing for more creative solutions, for more creative thinking, because fundamentally, the more that you create friction in a process, the greater the likelihood at times of you being able to create vulnerabilities. So clients are really pushing for that rethinking, reimagining, simplifying type of I guess, philosophy. And in doing so, I think that should inherently help with some of these cyber issues. So I think that creative aspect does certainly help in that regard from a cyber point of view, of being able to push through some of the current challenges.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that too often, even in my world, we're simply trying to replicate the traditional way of working online. Well, this really gives us an opportunity to completely forget the past and leapfrog and go to a completely different model. So I agree with you 100%. And those are things that we're experimenting with in the cyberspace with some of our clients. And I'm really, really excited about that. But let's change gears a little bit. I'm conscious of time. I want to talk a little bit with you about another area, and you touched on it earlier, but I want to dig deeper into that. I'm really passionate about, and I get slapped down sometimes by some of my colleagues in the cybersecurity industry, which is around, can cybersecurity be used as part of the value proposition? So, for example, we know that trust and confidence is the bedrock of most industries, and even more so now during COVID-19. The question is how and should cybersecurity be actually put in front of the customer experience or made visible to the customers, so that the customer understands that that organization, that enterprise, takes cybersecurity, privacy really, really seriously, and therefore enhances trust and confidence. What do you think about that, David?
I mean, I could not agree more. And you know, we have a trust by design solution here at EY. We're very passionate about this topic, but to bring this to sort of, I guess, a more practical end, if I use the example of profile, and we talk about profile in the context of not just security and privacy and so forth, but also in terms of the experience, the richer the profile, by definition, the more personalized that experience can be. But obviously, people are concerned about, you know, companies knowing too much about them, having access to information. So I do think this profile, identity, virtual identity, and so forth is absolutely critical for driving the one-to-one contextual experiences that people want. And thus, I believe that that is something where trust by design and the cyber side of that and the privacy and so forth, all of those things are going to come to the forefront of companies being able to say, we've got your profile locked down, we've got it safe and secure. And in doing so, we're able to give you an even better experience. That is increasing trend I see in the industries across both financial services, health, government, and so forth. So I do think this notion of profile and what that actually pertains to is a big thing that I think will bring again the worlds together from cyber and digital.
That's reassuring, because, you know, if I think back many years ago, there was a survey done in the UK, I think by Which Magazine, which tried to rank the UK banks, online banks, by their security measures. And I thought that was fascinating and probably a turning point, because if consumers start to think about security when they make a decision around who they should bank with, then that's going to increase the profile and hopefully the importance of security and help that integration that we've been talking about. I personally don't think we're there yet. I think this is a journey. But as a consumer, if my bank or my broadband provider was to say to me, as opposed to paying X dollars or euros or franc or whatever it is per month, you can pay Y, and you get a bump up in terms of security and privacy, I would definitely make that decision to go with them.
Yeah, and I think in that respect, you know, I agree with you, and personally, I agree with you that I would. I think also it's not just about the ability to, you know, to your point, bump up security, but it's also about the optionality and the ability to trade between, you know, offering more information to the company and then getting something from that, and having the ability, the toggles to be able to do that, and the transparency to know when all of that is happening. So I you know, you see a lot of this starting to happen in experiences at the moment, but I think this will again be an increasing trend, whereby that level of transparency is going to be really important, and that level of flexibility and optionality around security again is going to be something that needs to be built into the experiences, which in of itself will then drive obviously the cyber side to have to be more flexible in terms of how they deliver some of those solutions.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm conscious of time, David, and I want to try and leave our viewers today with some, tips and techniques and thoughts around what they can do to try and enhance the situations when they go back to their organizations. The three things that spring to my mind, maybe I'll just put them out there and see what you think, and maybe if you have anything to add. One is around, and you touched on it already, organizations should be embedding cybersecurity skills and team members into the digital teams from the get-go. As opposed to having them in separate organizations. So that's maybe job rotation and integration of the teams. The second one is around helping cybersecurity specialists understand some of the new methodologies in design and development that the digital teams are using, so we can begin to catch up and maintain the pace with you. And then the third one is, and this is really tough, but it's adoption by the cyber team again of a fail fast culture. And that's not something that comes easy for us, because failure in our world is seen as a pretty serious problem, because if we fail in cyber, it's very, very serious. What are your thoughts on those? And do you have anything to add from a point of view?
Yeah, I agree with those three. I would also flip it over to the other side, whereby I really do think the broader sort of digital teams need to get more familiar, more understanding of the cyber landscape, of the technologies, of what lies beneath this. Because I think in doing so, and when I'm getting increasingly knowledgeable about those things, you can see business differentiators through that. You can see the complexities of what's happening. And then collectively, as a group, we can come together to try and solve those problems. So I do think it's not just about cyber. I do think from the digital and product management and so forth, those teams need to really get a better understanding of some of those constraints and restrictions and so forth, and be able to use that to enhance the designs and experience that they're offering. So I think it's both sides of the coin. And I think also, like most things, we need to look at how we measure and sort of report upon progress, and make sure that it sort of gives both sides of the equation and the metrics are balanced for both types of teams.
Fully agree. Exciting times. Well, listen, David, we're just about out of time, so I wanted to thank you so much. It was great reconnecting with you. Hopefully we can stay in touch, and hopefully this journey will evolve as quickly as it needs to, because clearly the industry is moving fast, and truly I believe that the cyber and digital teams need to work much more closely together. But for now, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, William. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, David. Back to you, Maria.
Want access to more CogX videos? Subscribe now for free at cogx.co.